Today I'm going to show you how to start stitching with a sewing machine. If you're looking at your sewing machine thinking,
Okay, what do I do first?
you're in the right place. It can feel surprisingly overwhelming when you're just getting started because there are so many little things no one explains. What foot should you use? Where should you line up the fabric? And what do you do with all these buttons? By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to get started and feel confident making your first stitches. I've broken everything down into 4 simple sections. What you'll need, how to get your machine ready, how to make your first stitches, and finally, some common beginner mistakes you'll definitely want to avoid. Hi, I'm Victoria, and I help you sew practical, stylish accessories that are ready for real life and real adventures. Let's start with what you'll need, because having the right setup from the beginning makes learning to sew much easier. First, you'll obviously need a sewing machine. You'll also need some thread. If you're just getting started, I recommend using an all-purpose thread. It works well for most beginner projects, and it's a great place to start. Next, you'll need a sewing machine needle. Your machine probably came with a small starter pack, and for today's practice, that's perfectly fine. Sewing machine needles come in different types and sizes because different fabrics have different needs. But don't let that overwhelm you. For today's practice, just use a universal 90/14 needle. It's an excellent all-purpose needle for cottons and other common fabrics most beginners start with. If your machine didn't come with any needles, I'd recommend buying needles from the same manufacturer as your sewing machine. It ensures everything works the way it should. Finally, grab a small piece of scrap fabric that's already been pressed or ironed nice and flat for practice. Before we make our first stitches, let's get your machine ready to sew. Start by installing your machine needle. Loosen the needle clamp screw just enough to remove or insert the needle. Then slide the new needle all the way up into the machine with the flat side facing the back. Once it's up as far as it can go, tighten the clamp screw again. Next, install your general purpose presser foot. This is the standard presser foot that comes with most sewing machines, although it may look a little different depending on your model, so check your manual if you're not sure which one it is. My machine uses snap-on presser feet, so I simply line it up underneath the holder and lower the presser foot until it clicks into place. Now thread the upper thread on your machine. If you've never done that before, I have a step-by-step tutorial that walks you through the entire process. I'll link it here. Next, wind and insert your bobbin following the diagram on your sewing machine or the instructions in your manual. I've also made a dedicated tutorial for that, which I'll link on screen as well. Finally, leave your thread tension on the default or automatic setting for now. Tension is its own topic, and I have another video that explains how it works in much more detail. But while you're learning the basics, the default setting is the best place to start. Once that's done, grab your pressed scrap fabric, and we're ready to make our first stitches. Now it's time to make your first stitches. Start by selecting a straight stitch. On most electronic sewing machines, that's already the default setting when you turn the machine on. If your machine uses dials instead, simply turn the stitch selector until it is pointing to the straight dashed line. You'll also notice settings for stitch length and stitch width. Stitch length controls how long each stitch is, while stitch width controls how wide certain stitches are, like a zigzag stitch. For a basic straight stitch like we're using today, just leave both settings on their default values. They'll work perfectly for this exercise. Now let's get the fabric into position. Under the presser foot, you'll see the metal needle plate with several guide marks. Those guide marks help you keep your seam straight, while the feed dogs underneath move the fabric through the machine as you sew. For today's practice, simply choose one of those guide marks and line the edge of your fabric up with it. Position the top edge of the fabric just slightly past the needle so the feed dogs have enough fabric to grab. Then lower the presser foot. Don't worry about sewing perfectly straight on your first try. The goal here is simply to get comfortable guiding the fabric through the machine. If your machine has speed control, set it to the slowest setting. If it doesn't, just use a light touch on the foot pedal and sew slowly. Sew forward just a few stitches, then back stitch to lock those stitches in place. On my machine, I do it by holding down the button with a little U-turn arrow on it. As long as I hold the button, the machine sews backwards. Check your manual for how your machine sews backward. Now sew slowly all the way to the end of the fabric, keeping your eyes on the guide mark, not the needle. The machine already knows where the needle is going. Your job is simply to keep the edge of the fabric lined up with the guide mark as it feeds through the machine. When you reach the end, backstitch a few more stitches to lock the stitching, then sew forward to the edge one last last time. Raise the presser foot, remove the fabric, and trim your threads. And that's it! You've just sewn your first line of stitching. Next, we'll talk about some common beginner mistakes. But before we get into that, I want to quickly tell you about my sewing measurement guide. It's designed to take the overwhelm out of all of the measurements, related tools, and terms beginners run into when they're first learning to sew. Instead of wondering what all these different rulers are for, what a jelly roll or fabric bolt actually is, which marking tool you should buy, or trying to remember measurements and conversions, this guide brings everything together in one beginner-friendly resource. It includes measurement charts, printable rulers and templates, conversion charts, visual diagrams, and clear explanations that make those everyday sewing concepts finally make sense. And even after you've been sewing for a while, it becomes a handy resource you'll find yourself coming back to again and again instead of searching for the answer every time you need it. If that sounds like something that would make sewing a little less overwhelming, you can find it via the QR code on screen or linked in the description below. Now let's talk about some common beginner stitching mistakes to avoid. Before you start your first project, here are a few common beginner mistakes to watch out for. First, don't watch the needle, watch the guide mark. Focusing on keeping your fabric aligned with the guide mark is what keeps your stitches straight. Next, don't pull or push the fabric through the machine. Just rest your hands gently on the fabric to guide it and let the feed dogs do the work. And don't forget to lower your presser foot before you start sewing. Sometimes I do this. Also, don't sew too fast. Slow down while you're learning. It's much easier to stay accurate, and speed will come with practice. If you start having stitching problems, don't overlook the needle. Using the wrong needle or a dull one can cause issues even if everything else is set up correctly. And don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and end of your seams. Those stitches help lock everything in place so your stitching doesn't come undone. And if your thread jams, don't try to force the machine through it. Stop sewing, clear the jam, and then start again to avoid harming your machine. And finally, pay attention to unusual sounds. Unusual sounds are usually the first indicator that something might be off. So if it suddenly starts making a strange noise, stop and figure out what's going on before you keep sewing. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button to help it reach more people. And if you'd like more sewing tutorials and practical tips, be sure to subscribe. And if you're ready to build on what you learned today, check out these two videos next. Thanks for watching!